All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for day 2 of the Accessible Reading Symposium. My name is Lindsay Tyler, and I'm with CELA, the Center for Equitable Library Access. Today, we're doing the Introduction to Accessible Reading Sectors session, which brings together multiple perspectives from multiple sectors involved in creating and supporting accessible reading. This event is possible thanks to support from the Government of Canada's Equitable Access to Reading program. So I have a few points of order and housekeeping items before we begin with the speakers today. First, this is a bilingual session. We will have live interpretation into French and English. So if you prefer one language or the other, please choose now the interpretation option, which we will find in the Zoom window. And if you're a visual user, you may find a globe icon. That's what you're looking for, and select the icon, the language rather, that you prefer. If you would like to listen to the bilingual session, you do not have to choose any language option at all, and you will hear the language that the speaker is using. I'll begin with a land acknowledgement for the country as a whole. We would like to acknowledge the historical oppression of land, cultures, and original peoples in what we now know as Canada. We affirm the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous people across the land and continue to honor the commitments to self-determination and sovereignty we have made to Indigenous nations and people. I invite you to take a moment to recall the lands on which you live and work. We are recording the session today, and we will make the recordings available on the CELA, BNQ, and NEL's YouTube channels. We will not record the Q&A discussions. We will have time for questions at the end of the session, and if you would like to ask a question, you can type it in the chat or raise your hand during the Q&A session, and we will unmute you. I also would like to pass on a few keyboard shortcuts that you may wish to use. To raise your hand during the Q&A, you can press Alt-Y on Windows and Option-Y on Mac. If you want to use the chat, you can open it by pressing Alt-H on Windows and Command-Shift-H on Mac. I see that there's a question about the language, so je vais parler en français un instant. Si vous préférez écouter la séance en français, vous devez sélectionner l'option interprétation et choisir votre langue ensuite, que ce soit le français ou l'anglais. Donc, c'est dans l'application Zoom que vous faites ce choix. Cameras are optional for the event, and we'll have a 10-minute break between the Q&A for the, I want to describe what we're doing in the session first before I talk about the breaks. So today our session will run from 1 Eastern or 10 Pacific to 3:30 Eastern or 12:30 Pacific. We'll begin with a library, content provider, and publishing expert speakers. Each speaker will speak for 5 minutes, and we'll have a Q&A for those 3 groups following. And the members of the organizing committee will assist with the Q&A. Then we'll have a 10-minute break from 2:15 Eastern or 1:15 Pacific. And then from 2:25 Eastern, 11:25 Pacific until 3:13 Eastern or 12:13 Pacific, we'll hear from technology providers, and they each have 8 minutes to speak, followed by a Q&A. If you're a speaker and you need to share your screen, you should have the necessary permissions to do so when your turn comes. And we are going to stick quite tightly to the timeline, so be prepared to speak within your allotted time. I will briefly introduce each speaker so you'll know when it's your turn. And we'll end with closing remarks from the organizing committee. All right, so with that, let's get started. I'm looking for Patty Lynn, and if you to go first, Patty Lynn and Jeffrey Allen from Regina Public Library.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, apologies. I just can't get my video to work, and I'm not certain why. I just haven't been in Zoom for a bit, I guess. Anyway, so you don't get to see me, though. That's fine. So Jeffrey is not able to be here this morning, so I will read his portion of our little presentation. So we'll start first with kind of trends and collections, and then I will focus more on the accessibility.
Et ensuite, je vais aller me diriger vers l'accessibilité. Donc, les collections accessibilité vraiment se concentrent sur les
other formats like Braille through SELA. We maintain large print collections in all branches, and they are very well used. The situation with audio materials has changed rapidly, though, where the audiobooks on CD were once the mainstay of our collection. Their use has almost entirely dried up, with customers switching to downloadable audio materials instead. And this is mainstream collections and of course, to some degree in the accessible collections as well. Just in terms of putting some numbers on it, last year, 97% of audiobooks accessed at RPL were downloadable audio, which is up very much from previous years. It's also getting harder to purchase audiobooks on CD, which I think everybody here probably knows that. And as we know too, SELA has stopped producing the physical discs to send to libraries. And from RPL's perspective anyway, the good news is that we've been able to help customers transition to some new technologies, and we're able to continue supporting those who are reluctant to change formats, because there will always be those individuals, and we just, we don't want to leave them high and dry. A few years back, we spread our SELA collection out across our branches with the philosophy that accessible collections should be accessible to all, regardless of what branch you go to. And what we learned over subsequent years, though, is that they saw very little circulation, and that circulation that did happen was driven by holds and by requests through our home library service staff. And so we did remove those and many other audiobooks from our branches because they were so little used. In terms of their accessibility, though, we still have them in our operations center. So they can be requested by any branch, any person, anytime. It generally takes about a day for it to get there. So the SELA discs that we have still, and we will be hanging on to those for a long time, I think, our customers still can get those items. In terms of more just accessibility in general here at RPL, we've really made it a priority, especially in the last few years. And it started with a name change for our unit, which was Outreach Services. And what we do is support those with print disabilities, and Outreach did not accurately reflect what we do. And so we are now Accessibility Services, which is more fitting. More change had followed from that, and we moved a little bit beyond our traditional model of service and looked at RPL with a more comprehensive lens of accessibility. After much customer consultation and research, we were able to introduce hearing loops and blind square beacons to all of our branches in Regina. And what this does is offer a more accessible customer service for some people, and a better customer service experience, and also better wayfinding in general, of course. I mentioned the significant shift from disc to digital books. And it has changed, of course, the way that our collection staff develop and maintain our books. But we see this shift as well in our work with people with print disabilities. The shift is slower, but it is still there. Most or more customers than ever, I think we see have a higher degree of knowledge and confidence in digital skills. So I think that's part of it. Another part of it is CELA's moving away from providing the physical option. And in that change, we're seeing people finding ways to adapt to the digital way. And of course, we see some that are not doing that so much and not doing it as confidently. One thing that has helped us tremendously is that we purchased 34 Envoy readers. With them, we can help to fill that gap and provide the access to the digital format. This is not an easy or straightforward process. A lot of work goes into identifying customers that we think would be well matched to the device. And then we also look at how the selecting and loading of books will be done. Will it be done by staff? Will it be done by them? So this is a learning curve for sure for staff as well as customers, and we're learning with them. We, of course, I should say, still have Victor readers to support customers. So we can still do the disc route of things. And we are looking at potentially burning some discs here on site to help fill that gap as well. All in all, though, it's been very exciting to be part of this innovation and part of this change. It's inevitable. We saw it, of course, with the cassettes and moving to the discs, and now we're seeing it again. But it brings me to the end. And did I do that within 5 minutes?
Thank you, Patty Lynn. And now we'll hear from Shauna Picard from Nelson Public Library in British Columbia.
Hi, everyone. I'm part of the public services team for the Nelson Public Library. Nelson is located in the traditional territory of the Sinixt, Kootenai, and Syilx people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Indigenous people. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment in our strength as a community. In settler terms, Nelson is in the West Kootenai region of southeastern British Columbia. We serve a population of a little more than 12,000 people within the city limits and about another 10,000 in the surrounding rural mountain and valley area. When people think about the ideals of library accessibility, they often picture large urban systems with bigger budgets and specialized staff. And in a smaller library, things look a little different. We have limited funding, a smaller building, fewer staff, and a much smaller collection. But our commitment to access and inclusion is just as strong. One of our biggest challenges is resources. Accessible materials like large print books and audiobooks and certain adaptive technologies can be more expensive, and we have to be thoughtful about every purchase that we make. We can't always buy everything we'd like to have on our shelves. Wherever possible, we make choices that serve everyone. One recent success has been the addition of Yoda players and their cards to our collection. These are fun and popular items for our typically abled families, but their ease of use and audio format also makes them great options for families with print accessibility needs. Likewise, the addition of sensory materials such as headphones and fidget toys available during programs, movable shelves that create flexible spaces to better accommodate mobility devices, and more accessible service desks help all of our patrons. We've applied for community grants, such as the TELUS Community Foundation grant, to purchase some of these resources and furnishing. Small grants for accessibility improvements have made it possible for us to make progress bit by bit. One thing that really makes a difference is that accessibility is a team effort. In a small library, everyone wears multiple hats, and everyone contributes. There isn't one accessibility person. All of us share the responsibility. That might mean helping move furniture to create more space, learning how to assist with e-readers or screen magnification, adjusting how we run programs, or simply taking extra time to make sure everyone feels supported and heard. Along with sharing responsibilities, my coworkers and I share knowledge with each other. Whether it's skills learned through formal professional development training or tips and tricks we figure out as we go, we make sure that everyone stays up to date. I'm certainly bringing back information from this symposium to improve what we do as a team. In many ways, we rely on listening. In rural communities, relationships matter. We know many of our patrons personally, and that helps us understand what we need. I think this is where we shine most. From the local teen who needs large print materials to the senior in long-term care who's learning about audiobooks for the first time. We're able to get to know our patrons and their needs on a personal level that might be difficult in a larger library system. It's a work in progress, and we still have lots of room for improvement. One area I find challenging is keeping staff skills up to date when interactions with patrons who have accessibility needs are relatively infrequent among the many people we serve and the many tasks we manage in a day. Sometimes it's hard to remember what we learned in a NELS training 6 months ago when there's a patron in front of you who needs support and you don't use that knowledge every day. But as I often say, the top skills of librarians everywhere is figuring things out. We might not always know the answer, but we certainly know how to find it. Serving patrons with accessibility needs in a small rural library definitely comes with challenges, but it's also incredibly meaningful work. At the end of the day, our goal is simple. We want everyone who walks through our doors or visits us online to feel welcome, supported, and able to access what we need. It takes creativity, flexibility, and teamwork, but together we make it work. Thank you so much for listening. Great to be here.
Feather Miracle from Six Nations Public Library can speak next.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm very honored to be here with you and especially to share about my library. So my name is Feather Miracle, and I am the CEO and Director of Library Services for the Six Nations Public Library. The Six Nations Public Library is the oldest and largest First Nation public library in the world. We are located in downtown Ohsweken on Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve, and that is about maybe 1.5 hours drive south of Toronto in Ontario, just to give you an orientation of where we are. So the library has accessible collections. We have large print. We have the Daisy Reader. We have the Sela. We have a Sela disc collection of audiobooks as well as magazines, and we have individual audiobook readers. The library also purchases e-resources, and so that would be like Overdrive and Libby. In addition to these that are accessible from the library proper, the Six Nations Public Library also has reciprocal borrowing agreements with the surrounding libraries. So that would include the Brantford Public Library, Hamilton Public Library, County of Brant Library System, Haldimand Public Library System, and Norfolk County Library System. So all of these other library systems also have e-resources. You can only max out when you have these e-resources. I don't know, with the Overdrive and the Libby, you max out at 10 loans. So potentially you could get 60 if you belong to my library. That's 2 books a day. Anyhow, based on a 30-day month. But so the library is fantastic. What makes our library unique, for one, is it is a First Nation public library, and in particular, in the Accessible Reading Symposium, which makes our library even more unique, is that we have a Braille collection. The Six Nations Public Library is one of 7 public libraries in Canada to hold a Braille collection. So we're very proud to have this. It was, when I was young, I had a fear of going blind. And so I taught myself to read Braille, and I thought it's a fantastic resource. And so once I, took over the Six Nations Public, I worked to develop a Braille collection. Also, I'm not sure if people are aware that you can ship Braille for free in Canada. Also, the Braille collection is one book can be very, very large. At any rate, so those are some of the fantastic pieces about Braille and the Six Nations Public Library. I understand that in 2024 that it was the 200th anniversary of Braille. So it's 202 years old now, which I think is very fantastic. I think it's an excellent resource. We are looking at, I've tried for many years. I'd really like to have a Brailler accessible from our library. I have used one, and I think that they are a phenomenal tool. One of the projects that I would be looking at, oh, Mark, you're here. I was going to talk about you too. One of the projects that I would like to work on is to translate because of the Six Nations, we are responsible for 6 languages, and to begin translating those languages into Braille for increased accessibility. So if anybody knows a way that I could get my hands on a Brailler, I'm very excited to know. And so, yes, I saw that Professor Mark Wheeler is here from Wilfrid Laurier University, and it gives me tremendous pride, and it really humbles me to be recognized that we do have people that look at our collection and are aware. And so Mark has shared with me over the years about, he's commended the library for having the Braille collection, and he also wrote to me about a grad student who is a Braille user and wanted to write something about accessibility in higher education, and so they decided to create a story about a blind child who wanted to become an astronaut, and in the story describing other aspects of higher education. And as the story goes on, this young astronaut thanks the Six Nations Public Library for having this Braille collection. And so it's extremely humbling, and I'm very proud to have this collection and to have it accessible for anybody with that wants to come in and take a look at it. We also have some metal panels on how to read Braille. And so we'd like to offer those courses, and down the road. Also, just my last note that the library I was very happy to be a signatory on the letter calling for repealing of part of Bill C-15 about Canada Post and delivery for the blind. At any rate, I believe that is my time. Niragoa.
Thank you, Feather. I think we have Souad Orama des bibliothèques de Montréal.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez? OK, ça va.
Oui.
J'avais pas activé le micro. OK, donc, Soit vraiment, je travaille à la direction des bibliothèques de Montréal. Aujourd'hui, je vais présenter le travail que nous faisons dans notre réseau des bibliothèques de Montréal pour rendre la lecture accessible aux personnes ayant une déficience perceptuelle. Donc, nous travaillons sur plusieurs volets. Notamment, nous travaillons avec des partenaires qui nous aident à réfléchir, ainsi que des organismes qui travaillent avec des membres ayant des difficultés de lecture pour travailler ensemble à trouver des solutions qui peuvent convenir aux personnes ayant des difficultés de lecture. Donc, dans ce sens-là, nous avons travaillé une boîte à outils pour rendre la lecture accessible selon un modèle le modèle de parcours sans obstacle qui vise à essayer de travailler en fait la planification, donc tout ce qui est information, communication avant de se rendre en bibliothèque, la participation, donc tout ce qui est espace, activité, collection. Puis, à la fin, ben, le départ, la rétroaction, permettre aussi à ces abonnés-là de nous dire comment ils ont trouvé leur expérience. Nous avons aussi travaillé avec notre partenaire pour rendre les activités de lecture accessibles pour les enfants neurodivergents en bibliothèque. Donc, c'était aussi en consultant des parents, mais aussi des professionnels dans le réseau pour faire comme des activités inclusives en fait, de la posture des employés qui accueillent ces personnes-là au déroulement de l'activité. Aussi, dans ce sens-là, nous avons aussi créé un tableau de pictogrammes pour permettre aux personnes qui ont des difficultés de communication, qui peuvent pas lire aussi, de pouvoir bénéficier de services et d'activités qui répondent à leurs besoins, donc rendre en fait l'espace inclusif aussi, pas seulement les activités, puis les inviter à utiliser nos services. Euh, aussi, pour ça, donc, on a le travail avec les partenaires, mais on a aussi des formations. Donc, nous offrons aussi des formations pour l'accueil, mais aussi pour animer des activités de lecture inclusive. Donc, on a offert récemment une activité en lien avec la communication alternative et améliorée qui permet de rendre la lecture lors du compte inclusive pour les jeunes enfants qui ont des difficultés de lecture ou des difficultés des perceptions. Des difficultés perceptuelles. Aussi, dans ce sens-là, il y a aussi des formations qui sont offertes à tout le personnel dans les bibliothèques de Montréal pour favoriser l'accueil de tout le monde, puis de répondre aux demandes et aux questions de tous nos usagers, usagères. Euh, ben, comme ça a été mentionné, des collections adaptées aussi. Donc, nous avons une vaste collection de 4 millions de documents, dont 160 000 en format adapté pour répondre à une diversité de besoins. Donc, on a des livres numériques et audio numériques. Nous avons des livres physiques aussi qu'on appelle les livres parlants, les livres gros caractères, quelques livres en braille, des livres audio en format MP3, mais aussi d'autres collections comme les DVD et les Blu-ray qui sont avec audio description ou sous-titres. Donc, ça permet aussi à toutes les personnes d'avoir accès à des collections qui répondent aux besoins. Pour accompagner tout ce travail-là, aussi, nous offrons dans le réseau aussi de l'équipement adapté. Donc, nous avons déployé, nous avons offert des lecteurs DAISY dans 23 bibliothèques. Euh, nos bibliothèques sont équipées de logiciels spécialisés comme JAWS, donc pour la lecture d'écran, Zoom Text, qui sont des logiciels d'agrandissement et de contraste, des loupes numériques, des claviers d'ordinateur adaptés, des claviers avec des étiquettes contrastantes, téléagrandisseurs. Donc, on essaye de rendre, en fait, aller au-delà pour rendre toute la bibliothèque accessible et permettre à tout le monde de profiter de l'ensemble des services. Euh, Cela dit, on a encore il y a encore des efforts à maintenir et à consolider. Il y a la disponibilité, l'accessibilité des formats adaptés en contenu intéressant n'est pas toujours là, donc il y a encore de la difficulté à aller chercher des contenus intéressants en format adapté. La visibilité de l'information sur les équipements adaptés et les collections spécialisées n'est pas toujours facile à repérer, autant pour le public que pour le personnel. Donc, on a besoin de travailler davantage la communication de de tout ce qui est offert pour permettre à tous les usagers, usagères de profiter de l'offre qu'on leur fait. Il y a aussi la formation du personnel. Donc, on a plusieurs outils en bibliothèque, que ce soit les logiciels que j'ai nommés, mais il y a aussi d'autres outils de l'équipement aussi qui demande une certaine formation pour bien l'utiliser, puis le montrer aussi à nos usagères et usagers pour bien l'utiliser. Donc, il y a encore ce soutien-là qui n'est pas toujours disponible dans toutes les bibliothèques parce que ça demande des ressources et du temps pour former nos employés. Donc, ces enjeux-là nous guident dans les prochaines étapes de développement de l'accessibilité du réseau. Puis, pour finir, c'est ça, donc grâce à nos partenaires, grâce aux organismes avec lesquels on travaille, les outils, les formations, les collections adaptées, les équipements, nous avançons concrètement vers un réseau plus inclusif, mais aussi nous poursuivons un travail afin que chaque personne puisse lire, apprendre et participer à sa façon. Je ne sais pas si c'est le temps. OK, c'est ça, j'ai
Merci
fini.
beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Otherwise, we'll move to the content providers section of our session today, and I'll give the hand it over to Daniela Levy-Pinto from NELS.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Daniela Levy-Pinto. I am the manager of NELS, National Network for Equitable Library Service, and I am totally blind. Equitable access to reading means having the right book in the right format at the right time. For many people with print disabilities in Canada, this is still not the case. In the past decade, we have seen real progress regarding accessible reading. EPUB 3 is now the most accessible and flexible ebook format out there. Many publishers have embraced born accessible publishing models, and there's a new Braille, electronic Braille file type that allows for better navigation. However, despite all this progress, we have a long way to go. Too many titles are still not available in accessible formats, leaving large gaps in what people with a print disability in Canada can choose to read. And even when content is accessible, is sometimes delivered in platforms that are not accessible, reading people without practical ways to access books they have found. We also face a consistent misconception that Braille is an outdated system. It is not. Braille is essential for literacy, for blind and deafblind readers that supports independence, education, and employment. Producing Braille is not a legacy task. Braille is literacy and fundamental for equitable reading. Quality also matters. A poorly structured ebook or an incorrectly formatted Braille file are not truly accessible. NELS operates within these gaps. NELS, National Network for Equitable Library Service, is an accessible Canadian digital library service that works with libraries for people with print disabilities. NELS is housed out of the BC Libraries Cooperative. NELS provides the books in the formats that people with print disabilities need, including DAISY audiobooks, accessible ebooks, and of course, Braille. NELS operates under the exception in the Canadian Copyright Act that permits the reproduction of works in alternate formats for persons with print disabilities, including visual, cognitive, and mobility impairments. This exception is a vital legal recognition that commercial efforts alone cannot deliver equitable access. Equitable access requires a deliberate and sustained effort. The NELS collection is informed by the readers we serve. People in participating provinces can request titles that do not exist in accessible formats, and NELS will produce them and add them to the collection. The work that NELS does is informed by people who have lived experience of a print disability, who, among other things, test files and reading applications on websites for accessibility, contribute to production, deliver presentations, and provide leadership within the organization. Collaboration is central to how NELS operates. Across Canada, we work with other alternate format producers to avoid duplication of efforts, to make the most out of limited resources through shared production planning and through file sharing agreements. Internationally, NELS is a member of the Accessible Books Consortium, and through the Marrakesh Treaty, we share accessible alternate format files across borders. NELS is also a part of the DAISY Consortium Canada, working alongside CELA, BA&Q, CARE, the Educational Alternate Format Producers, and CFLA, the Canadian Federation of Library Associations. The DAISY Consortium Canada provides a coordinated Canadian voice within the International DAISY Consortium to inform accessibility standards. And the DCC also creates a national forum to address emerging issues, including questions around technical protection measures and the use of AI in content remediation. Finally, I want to talk very briefly about funding. NELS receives core funding support through provincial and territorial governments. This sustains the basic service that we provide libraries. NELS also receives federal funding, which has allowed a significant expansion of what we can do, supporting expansion to the collection, enhancing our capacity to produce content, getting a dedicated team of accessibility experts, and testing accessibility for websites and applications. However, lack of consistent long-term funding creates real challenges. It is difficult to plan without consistent funding. It is also difficult to retain skilled staff and to support the production of specialized formats like Braille. All this requires specialized funding. NELS exists because gaps remain, and these special services need sustainable funding. NELS is a willing partner in building a reading ecosystem that truly works for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniela. Now we'll turn to Laurie Davidson from the Center for Equitable Library Access.
Hi there. Thanks, Lindsay. My name's Laurie Davidson, and I'm the Executive Director at CELA, which is the Center for Equitable Library Access. And my remarks, I think, will echo many of the same things that Daniela has shared about NELS. CELA is a national not-for-profit organization, and we provide accessible reading services in both English and French to the more than 5.2 million people in Canada with print disabilities, and we work through our network of public libraries across the country. Our collection includes over 1.5 million titles, and we combine our own accessible collection that we have produced and or remediated alongside licensed access to titles from Bookshare, which is a US-based provider of accessible books. And our guiding principle is format choice, and we provide the format that meets the needs of each reader with a print disability. And print disabilities include visual disabilities, comprehension or learning disabilities, and physical disabilities that make it difficult to handle or read a physical book. So CELA does its work within Canada's legislative exceptions. So these exceptions are not loopholes. They are an essential part of Canada's legislation, and they are designed to ensure equitable access to reading. And these exceptions function alongside the important work of publishers' commitment and work in born accessible publishing. And in this framework, CELA's role is to represent the user to ensure that there is a balance between users' rights and rights holders' rights, which is otherwise known as copyright. And so briefly, I want to go through these exceptions. The first, the most well-known one is Section 32 of the Copyright Act, which is key to our work, and it allows us to produce, without rights holder permission, accessible versions of copyrighted works. And this enables us to provide format choice when the desired accessible version is not already available in the commercial marketplace. Another exception, 41.161, is the exception that permits the circumvention of technological protection measures, or TPMs. These are also known in sort of our world as DRM, or digital rights management. And these, you can remove these technological protection measures when necessary for accessibility. And so I'll call out here that DRM can create significant barriers. Readers with print disabilities must be able to download and use books on the device, app, or assistive technology of their choice that best supports their needs, so they don't want to be locked in a particular platform. Another exception that we use is Section 32.011. This is what was added to Canada's Copyright Act to allow us to accede to the Marrakesh Treaty, which is basically allows for the international exchange of accessible materials that have been created under copyright exceptions worldwide. And so this allows us to expand access for our readers in Canada, and also allows us to share our collections internationally. And one of our primary partners on this front is ABC, the Global Books Consortium. And finally, I just want to call out the very important exception, which we have just undertaken an advocacy effort on, which are some exceptions in the Canada Post Corporations Act, which include provisions for free mailing for materials for the blind. So the recent Bill C-15, which is currently on the table to be voted on, which is the Omnibus Budget Bill, actually had in it the repealing of free literature for the blind, as well as reduced postage for library materials. So we undertook a successful advocacy effort on this front, along with many of our allies in this space. And we were successful in ensuring that these provisions were maintained as exceptions. But I call this out to say how important it is for us to be vigilant on this front, that we cannot take it for granted that these exceptions will exist. This exception was being removed without our awareness, without any consultation with the community, and we were the ones to uncover it and to therefore launch an advocacy campaign. So accessible content is only meaningful if it can be found and delivered, so we maintain a searchable repository that supports discovery and personalization. And CELA also in that repository supports digital and physical distribution. So we do digital distribution, direct-to-device delivery. We have a smart speaker option. We offer downloadable zip files. And we also provide physical mailing through Canada Post. And these physical materials include embossed braille, which are print children's books with braille pages interleaved through them. And we also provide audiobook players with audiobooks loaded on them, which we mail out through Canada Post. And in addition to the repository and distribution, of course, CELA is more broadly an accessible reading service. So our other services include training and education, direct support to readers with print disabilities. We support public libraries, educators, and other professionals serving people with print disabilities. And we're an advocate in general for accessibility and disability rights in reading. Our services are informed by the expertise and lived experience of people with print disabilities. So people with print disabilities test our content and platforms. Our users provide feedback through surveys and community engagement. And we have a commitment to hiring staff with print disabilities. And of course, our services are made better because of this expertise and experience. As Daniela said, our greatest challenge is funding. So like Nell, CELA relies on a public funding model, which is tiered. So in CELA's case, we get some contributions from individual libraries. We get contributions at the provincial and territorial level, and we also rely heavily on the federal government for funding. Our federal funding accounts for 50 to 60% of our budget, but it is allocated annually. It's not guaranteed, and the funding source can be highly competitive. We need sustained, adequate long-term federal funding, and this is essential to ensure that Canada can deliver a national accessible library service that complements born accessible publishing from the publishing sector. And I'll just finally call out to our partners, which is our greatest strengths in Canada. Our partners NNELS at National Network of Equitable Library Service and BANQ, the co-organizers of this event. Our three organizations together provide accessible public library service across Canada. CELA works obviously with public libraries, but also the K-12 and post-secondary sector, disability organizations within Canada, the international collaborators such as the DAISY Consortium and ABC, obviously closely with publishers both in Canada and beyond, and our many, many technology and partners, including some that are here today, Dolphin, Humanware, and EDR Labs. All of us working together to ensure that an equitable reading environment exists for everyone in Canada. Thank you.
Maintenant, j'aimerais passer la parole à Mélanie Dumas de la Bibliothèque et Archives nationales du Québec.
Bonjour tout le monde, je suis contente d'être ici cet après-midi. Donc, je suis Mélanie Dumas, directrice de la collection de la Grande Bibliothèque, la Bibliothèque et Archives nationales du Québec. Je vais vous parler du SQLA, qui est un service de BANQ dont la mission est d'offrir un accès démocratique à la culture et à la connaissance. Le SQLA offre des services aux personnes qui ont une déficience perceptuelle pour offrir un accès unique à des collections, à des services qui répondent aussi à leurs besoins d'information, d'éducation, de culture, de recherche et de loisirs. La mission est simple mais essentielle, c'est de rendre la lecture accessible à tous et à toutes en proposant gratuitement, c'est important la gratuité, des documents adaptés, un accompagnement personnalisé et des outils qui sont conçus pour être pleinement compatibles avec les technologies d'assistance. On dessert l'ensemble des Québécois qui ont une déficience perceptuelle par prennent bibliothèque, par téléchargement ou encore grâce à l'envoi postal. On assure la production et la mise à disposition des livres accessibles en français dans une variété de formats pour répondre à une variété de besoins. On a une collection audio en format DAISY, une collection en braille aussi, que ce soit braille intégral, braille abrégé, des partitions musicales et tous nos livres audio et nos livres en braille sont aussi disponibles à la fois sur support physique et sur support numérique pour téléchargement. On a aussi une collection d'albums jeunesse qui sont illustrés, qui peuvent comporter des illustrations sous forme tactile, des textes en braille intégral ou même les deux. Et souvent, il y a un CD qui accompagne aussi ces publications. On diffuse également des livres commerciaux numériques et audio numériques qui sont accessibles notamment via prennumérique.ca. On s'entend, tous les titres devraient exister en format accessible. Malheureusement, ce n'est pas le cas. Donc, sous l'égide du traité de Marrakech, le SQLA peut compter sur des partenaires et sur des initiatives comme l'Accessible Book Consortium pour bonifier son offre et rendre accessible à ses usagers des collections d'autres fournisseurs de contenu. J'ai dit, notre mission, c'est de garantir un accès accessible et équitable, un accès équitable à la lecture, oui, en s'assurant que les collections sont gratuites, qu'elles sont faciles à repérer, mais aussi qu'elles sont simples à utiliser. Donc, ça passe par des catalogues adaptés, une navigation qui est simplifiée et puis des plateformes qui sont compatibles avec les technologies d'assistance. On offre aussi un accès, un accompagnement direct, un service de référence, du soutien aux usagers aussi qui apprennent à utiliser les formats et les outils, que ce soit par téléphone ou par courriel. La sélection des titres, elle s'appuie sur la politique de développement de la collection de la Grande Bibliothèque, sur des principes qui sont reconnus en bibliothéconomie comme la pertinence, l'adéquation avec les besoins des usagers, la valeur intellectuelle puis la qualité du contenu, mais la sélection des titres tient également compte des contraintes techniques qui sont liées à la production. Comme les coûts de production sont très élevés, puis le nombre de titres qu'on peut produire est limité, mais les suggestions des usagers jouent un rôle déterminant dans le choix des titres qu'on produit. On s'appuie sur des partenaires de production, puis on mise aussi sur une diversification des sources d'approvisionnement, comme des partenariats pour bonifier l'offre. La mission du SQLA, ça s'inscrit dans un mandat pan-québécois. L'offre, elle est pleinement intégrée à l'offre de BANQ, puis on a des points d'accès via le catalogue du SQLA, mais aussi via le catalogue de BANQ, qui donne accès à la collection de la Grande Bibliothèque, qui inclut notamment des livres en grand caractère et des films avec vidéo description. Grâce à la présence sur tout le territoire québécois, mais les bibliothèques publiques sont des partenaires clés pour faciliter l'accès à la lecture aux personnes qui ont une déficience perceptuelle à travers les services du SQLA. On fait face à plusieurs défis, mes collègues en ont parlé, la complexité d'adapter certains livres, les ressources limitées, les coûts de production élevés, la rapidité de l'évolution des formats, c'est positif, mais ça requiert en fait de pouvoir s'adapter rapidement, puis pour diversifier nos sources d'approvisionnement. Il y a un nombre encore trop limité, il y en a de plus en plus, là, mais de publications commerciales qui sont accessibles de leurs publications. Il y a une fragmentation des plateformes parfois qui peut rendre l'accès moins simple qu'on le souhaiterait. Puis il y a aussi une grande diversité de besoins et de compétences numériques chez les usagers. Enfin, un rôle crucial là, qu'ont les fournisseurs de contenu, c'est d'intégrer la voix des personnes qui ont une déficience perceptuelle. Donc, ça passe par la participation à des comités consultatifs, des tests utilisateurs, la collaboration avec des spécialistes aussi, puis des lecteurs qui ont des déficiences perceptuelles. Par notre contact quotidien, là, les fournisseurs de contenu avec les personnes qui ont une déficience perceptuelle, on joue un rôle clé au sein des instances nationales et internationales en témoignant des besoins et des défis de la clientèle. Puis on contribue aussi à mettre en place des pratiques exemplaires puis à l'évolution des normes. Donc, on le voit, là, les fournisseurs de contenu jouent un rôle central dans l'accès équitable à la lecture. On produit, on adapte, on diffuse, on accompagne, on innove, puis on s'assure que la voix des usagers aussi soit prise en compte dans le développement de cette offre qu'on veut le plus variée et le plus riche et le plus inclusive possible.
Merci, Mélanie. And now we'll hear from Monica Halil-Loveblad from the Accessible Books Consortium.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Lindsay. So I'm Monica Halil-Loveblad. I'm head of the Accessible Books Consortium. I'm located in Geneva, Switzerland, and I represent an international content provider. I just want to check. You can all hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you. As many of you know, the Accessible Books Consortium, or ABC, is a private-public partnership that is led by the World Intellectual Property Organization, a UN specialized agency for intellectual property, policy, services, information, and cooperation. ABC supports the goals of the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled. And we seek to increase the number of accessible format copies of works and deliver these to people who are print disabled around the globe. ABC partners include the World Blind Union, the DAISY Consortium, the International Federation of Library Associations, the International Council for Education of People with Visual Impairment, publishers, and authors. So the Marrakesh Treaty, which is administered by WIPO, sets up a legal framework allowing for the production of accessible format copies of works, as well as the cross-border exchange of such accessible books, all for the benefit of people who are print disabled, and, importantly, without the need to request permission from copyright owners. Let me share some important milestones. The Marrakesh Treaty officially came into force on September 30th, 2016, when Canada became the 20th member state to join the treaty. So 2026 is significant in that we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Marrakesh Treaty coming into force. We hope to have actually some celebrations year-long, so stay posted for what we're planning. One of ABC's core activities is the ABC Global Book Service, which has been mentioned by Sila, Nels, and BenQ. So this service provides ABC partner organizations serving people who are print disabled, known as authorized entities under the Marrakesh Treaty, with the ability to exchange accessible format copies of works across borders at no cost. So this service is entirely free. The service has grown significantly and now includes 150 participating authorized entities, and we have four authorized entities from Canada. They were mentioned, so it's BenQ, Sila, CNIB, and NELS. I would also like to highlight the first symbolic cross-border exchange, which was conducted through the ABC Global Book Service on September 30th, 2016, when Canada joined the treaty, was between Canada and Australia. Today, the ABC catalog currently contains 1.2 million titles in 80 languages, all available for cross-border exchange under the framework of the Marrakesh Treaty. We have over 325,000 titles in English, 160,000 titles in French, and 70,000 titles in Spanish, but to name a few of our collections. ABC also offers a beneficiary application at no cost to participating authorized entities. This beneficiary application enables patrons of the participating authorized entity to search and immediately download accessible format copies from the ABC catalog. Currently, over 540,000 accessible format copies are available for immediate download through the ABC beneficiary application. Through our collaboration with Dolphin Computer Access, and I see Matthias is on the call, you'll be hearing from him later, a UK-based developer of accessibility software, the ABC beneficiary application catalog is now available in Dolphin Easy Reader. Easy Reader is a user-friendly application, as the name suggests, available on most reading devices at no cost. Finally, I want to highlight a current initiative with which ABC is involved, and this ties in with the point made by Daniela about Braille. Last year, ABC joined many organizations in celebrating the 200th anniversary of the invention of Braille. This year, ABC has partnered with the International Council for Education of People with Visual Impairment and the World Blind Union in a global Braille literacy campaign, which highlights Braille as the foundation of literacy and independence, as well as its continuing relevance in the digital era for people who are visually impaired. I would like to highlight that the ABC Global Book Service includes over 120,000 digital Braille titles, all available for cross-border exchange. Finally, I'd also like to highlight that ABC is in the process of developing an AI tool with the DAISY Consortium and with UNICEF. And I see also Richard is on the call from the DAISY Consortium. He'll probably speak about this. And you should stay posted for this development because we think it's going to be a pretty important tool that we would like to deploy to our authorized entities when it's ready and properly tested. We at ABC believe that equal access to information, culture, and education remains a fundamental right for all persons with disabilities. If anybody in the audience wishes to learn more about the Accessible Books Consortium, please contact us at accessible.books@wipo.int. So that's accessible.books@wipo.int. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. We're going to now turn to hearing from representatives of publishers, and we'll begin with Véronique Fontaine de l'Association nationale des éditeurs de livres.
Bonjour tout le monde, ça me fait plaisir d'être parmi vous. Donc, en fait, j'ai deux chapeaux, celui de l'Association nationale des éditeurs de livres, car je suis membre du conseil d'administration, mais aussi le chapeau de direction générale des éditions Fond, une maison d'édition. Donc, je vais y aller en deux parties pour mon court 5 minutes. D'abord, l'ANEL participe à différentes initiatives de différentes manières pour soutenir le livre accessible. D'abord, un partenariat avec deux marques qui, depuis 2018, en fait, développe dans le marché québécois et franco-canadien du livre numérique. Donc, c'est vraiment l'entrepôt numérique qu'on retrouve ici. De marques fournit à l'ANEL, entre autres, des données, des statistiques sur les ventes de livres numériques des maisons d'édition d'ici. Par exemple, en 2025, les ventes de livres numériques québécois via de marques en format PDF, EPUB et audio se sont élevés à 6 609 714 $ et le format EPUB représente environ 79% de ces ventes de livres-là. Donc, on voit que c'est quand même une part importante là, pour le EPUB. L'ANEL, donc, travaille aussi en collaboration avec différents partenaires. Par exemple, il y a une table de concertation des acteurs francophones du livre accessible au Canada qui est coordonnée par l'ANEL. Cette table réunit des gestionnaires d'organisations du livre canadien afin de favoriser l'échange et l'harmonisation des approches en matière d'accessibilité. Un autre dossier important dans lequel l'ANEL s'est impliqué, c'est le projet Biblius. Donc, je ne sais pas si vous connaissez bien la plateforme Biblius qui est au Québec, notre plateforme de prêt de livres numériques en bibliothèque scolaire. C'est un grand projet qui a été lancé officiellement en 2021. L'ANEL a toujours été informée, a participé à l'élaboration de cette plateforme-là. Puis c'est sûr que c'est quelque chose qui est important pour les éditeurs là, ici au Québec parce que ça permet d'avoir dans les écoles des livres numériques accessibles. D'ailleurs, je tiens à souligner que Biblius offre une collection partagée à l'ensemble des écoles au Québec, donc une sélection de livres qui est donnée gratuitement à toutes les écoles et vient d'annoncer que le PDF sera exclu de sa collection partagée. Donc, on voit que de plus en plus, le EPUB est le format qui est privilégié pour Biblius aussi. Donc, ce sont de bonnes nouvelles pour l'accessibilité. Sinon, l'ANEL, évidemment, fait beaucoup de formation et d'accompagnement des éditeurs. Il y a eu toutes sortes de façons là, de faire, là, que ce soit par des formations, passer des informations sur, par exemple, la directive européenne sur l'accessibilité, développer l'expertise des éditeurs, que ce soit en production d'EPUB ou de livres audio. Il y a d'ailleurs eu une campagne de conversion de livres en 2022-2023. C'est plus de 150 titres qui ont été convertis en format EPUB grâce au soutien à la conversion qu'offrait l'ANEL. Et puis, sur son site Internet, si jamais ça vous intéresse, l'ANEL propose une foule de ressources en lien avec le livre numérique accessible et audio. Et puis aussi, l'ANEL fait la promotion, bien sûr, de ce format, en fait, des différents formats accessibles par différentes campagnes publicitaires, dans des événements. Donc, l'ANEL est vraiment un joueur important là, pour, finalement, faire parler du livre accessible. Ce qui m'amène chez Fonfon avec mon chapeau d'éditrice, c'est sûr que moi, j'ai été beaucoup impliquée dans toutes ces actions-là de l'ANEL, l'initiative-là, puis ça m'a beaucoup sensibilisée. Comme éditeur, je pense qu'on doit savoir qu'on veut rejoindre le plus.
Publisher, we need to be able to reach as much readers as possible. And this is a way really that we can access these readers. So for me, it became a priority because for the new, to make sure, to ensure that we have the EPUB formats. And of course, also I do illustrated books. So
j'en suis consciente. Après, ce qu'on a décidé de faire, c'est à même nos étapes de production. On s'est dit, quand on crée le livre, ben, c'est important que d'emblée, le contraste texte sur le fond de couleurs ou s'il y a des dessins derrière, ben, que le texte soit très, très, très lisible et le plus facilement possible. Aussi, quand c'est un texte dans le livre papier qui est écrit à la main, on s'assure que la version numérique aura ben, une police de caractères qui pourra être lue par des synthèses vocales, par exemple. Aussi, on fait toujours une description d'image. Donc, finalement, on a trouvé les façons d'amener nos livres illustrés le plus accessible possible, malgré le fait qu'on est dans une contrainte d'un format fixe layout. Après, on a quand même une collection de petits romans pour lesquels, là, on peut faire du EPUB qui va être distribuable. Donc, pour ceux-là, on n'a pas cet enjeu-là. Et sinon, on fait des livres audio, mais plutôt que d'utiliser finalement l'espèce de description d'image directement dans l'audio, ce qu'on fait, c'est qu'on adapte le texte pour que l'histoire soit racontée puis qu'il manque aucune information puis que l'expérience soit bonne directement à l'audio sans avoir à copier là, dans les illustrations ce qu'on retrouve. On a aussi des formats DAISY qu'on va retrouver sur le SQLA, sur le NELS. Donc ça, c'est grâce au travail là, qui sont faits par les fournisseurs de services aussi. Puis on travaille également avec l'école Jacques Ouellette, qui est une école au Québec là, pour les élèves ayant un handicap visuel. Donc c'est super intéressant. Ils font beaucoup de formats braille de certains de nos livres. Donc voilà, je pourrais en parler encore des heures, mais ça ressemble à ça ce qu'on fait. Donc ça fait maintenant partie de nos pratiques en édition, donc d'essayer d'avoir des livres accessibles dès la publication. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Véronique. Now we'll go to Elizabeth Crawler from eBound.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I just wanted to give some background on eBound Canada. So I'm the operations manager, and we are a full service provider that enables publishers to engage in the digital marketplace. We represent over 80 independent Canadian publishers across the country, and we work with a lot of the publishers in creating accessible content and distributing their accessible content and making sure it's found and available and live. So for today, I'll be speaking specifically about accessible EPUB and what makes a book an accessible book. So an accessible EPUB would be accessible from day one and does not have to be remediated post-production to include the accessibility feature. So having to go back and add accessibility features is time-consuming and costly for publishers. Having the features built into the workflow from the very beginning increases the number of accessible content that is being produced each year, saves the publisher time, and makes more accessible content readily available. So for purposes of an accessible EPUB, we are speaking specifically about a reflowable layout instead of the fixed layout. The differences being that reflowable automatically adjust to the orientation of the reading device of the user, whereas fixed layouts are good for picture books, cookbooks, or graphic novels, and does not change its size and therefore cannot be fully accessible. So our goal is to make born accessible workflow start from the very beginning, starting with the editorial department, where they could provide image descriptions and word styles that are accessible. Moving on to the design and layout department, which would have accessible styles, incorporate the image descriptions, include table of contents, and export an accessible file. From there, the EPUB would be considered accessible, meeting accessibility conformance standards, and we'd also make sure that accessibility metadata is included in the schema.org, so inside the EPUB itself. Some examples of the accessibility features that we tend to focus on are language shift, alt text for images, including decorative images and making sure that they're marked accordingly. We ensure that correct heading orders are in place, descriptive title elements, and that no inline styling takes place. So some of the challenges that our publishers face in creating a born accessible workflow are around capacity, staff turnover, and financial resources. The most common being the capacity. They don't have the time to go back and change their workflow, or they don't have staff available to learn and apply accessibility. With staff turnover, oftentimes there's only one staff member that is trained and understands accessibility, and when they leave that job or position, they take that knowledge with them. So then the publishing house has to start from the very beginning. This also leads to the financial resource issues where it's costly to invest more time and training into their staff to keep reteaching the same accessibility features from the beginning. So one of our goals is to really build that knowledge in the Canadian industry. So the more people that have an understanding of accessibility features, the more often it will be used, and therefore increasing the born accessible workflow across Canadian publishers. It's also incredibly important to have accessible metadata included both inside the EPUB and in the Onyx metadata, which is sent to the vendor. And this has a greater increase of books being discoverable by those that need them, and to also understand what accessibility features are included in that EPUB if you're looking for specific features. So how a publisher can do this, eBound came up with an eBound digital certification. So it's the Canadian grown whole file health certification that reviews the accessibility of a file. And we also review the discoverability of that content. So publisher could submit up to 2 EPUBs for review. We would then review them in accordance with WCAG 2.2 AA standard and EPUB accessibility 1.1 standards. We provide the feedback, and changes are made directly to the workflow so that all new EPUBs being made going forward would automatically be considered accessible. We also review the Onyx metadata to ensure that information provided to vendors includes all of the accessibility features of the EPUB and discloses the correct information. So once publishers have passed, they would be subject to an annual spot check, and they would be able to stay compliant every year. We have almost 60 publishers that are through this program, and we are looking at expanding it internationally so that these Canadian standards are recognized everywhere. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And now we'll move to Laura Brady, an accessible publishing consultant.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to my friends at Nels and Sela for inviting me here. I am a bit of an accessibility busybody. I work with lots of publishers. I'm also on the board of the ABC, just to give you a little bit of context for who I am and what I do. I want to speak from a publisher perspective to other institutions here. And here's what I want you to know. Publishers aren't evil. Nobody wants to publish inaccessibly, but they're also overworked, underpaid, and frazzled by the depth of knowledge required to publish accessibly, as my colleague Elizabeth referred to a minute ago. It's not impossible, but it does require 2 important things: the will to cross your T's and dot your I's when it comes to accessibility, and some accessible content. The systemic problem with accessible publishing is that the institutional knowledge required to do an effective job is high level, deeply technical, and a very much in-demand skill set. Keeping folks with this kind of understanding employed in book publishing is an ongoing challenge because of poor pay levels. It probably won't surprise many of you here, but book publishing in Canada doesn't pay all that well. Folks get trained, they understand what it takes to make a good accessible EPUB, or what WCAG means, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and then they move on to other sectors where their pay is effectively doubled. The job descriptions can also be problematic. The person responsible for accessibility might also be the person who manages the customer service inbox, who gets books to the printer and writes metadata, etc. Most publishing employees in Canada work for very small firms and wear several hats, which means that they may be thinking about accessibility out of the corner of their eye, so to speak. That's a lot of mixed metaphors there, but hopefully you understand what I'm getting at. Or that the work of accessibility might be spread across 3 or 4 people who don't get to collaborate as often as necessary, leading to gaps and redundancies. So even with the best intentions, book publishers have a hard time retaining the institutional knowledge required to meet accessibility standards regularly, and this is a crying shame. My colleague Christina Musinelli from Fondazione Elia says all the time that accessibility is a culture. And this needs to be stated over and over again, particularly within publishing houses. Accessibility is a culture and it's part of everyone's jobs. Amanda yesterday, if you were with us yesterday, Amanda Leduc spoke about this, how it's part of everyone's job and everyone's responsibilities, and that can't be understated. Accessibility is a culture. So now let's talk about the impetus to publish accessibly. There is no doubt in my mind that the cycle works best when everyone in a publishing house understands the issues at play, making it a group effort with checks and balances built in. But you know what also works well? The threat of 5,000 euro fines. The threat of legislation is a very, very good way to get publishers to sit up and pay attention. The Accessible Books Initiative, which many of you may be familiar with, it ran from 2019 to 2024. It was part of the Canada Book Fund and the Department of Canadian Heritage. It was an excellent boost to the industry from which the Canadian publishing landscape has benefited tremendously. But accessibility work is not wrapped up now that the fund is exhausted and there are no formal supports for accessibility work. I worry that the ABI has publishers sort of wiping their hands, congratulating themselves on a job well done and moving on. And that's where the deep value of a legislative and governance motivation comes in. The European Accessibility Act, despite having no mandate in Canada, is a wonderful prism through which to see the direct impact of those 5,000 euro fines. Publishers who want to distribute internationally must pay attention to the legislation on another content, and that's a beautiful thing. I find myself being quite envious of the impact of the EAA and wishing for legislation with teeth in Canada. Have I contemplated starting a petition to become part of the EU? Maybe. And here's some other things that I see happening. Publishers run their books through tools like Ace by Daisy and consider their content fully accessible if it passes. Pro tip, passing Ace is just the start of a good accessibility audit. I also see publishers self-certifying, which makes me very squeamish. As Elizabeth, my colleague from eBound, told us about their certification work, it's not expensive and it's excellent. Sign up with them. I also want to close out this short talk by pointing to Adobe InDesign. Part of my work is meeting publishers where they work, and that is in InDesign. 95% of books, both in Canada and around the world, are laid out in InDesign. And I've been working with a small expert group, which includes Richard Orm, who will speak in a few minutes. We've been working with the past 4 years on how to improve InDesign and how InDesign makes EPUB so that now a large swath of publishers are now making more accessible ebooks without even realizing it. Have I tricked them? Maybe. Thanks for having me. That's everything.
Thank you, Laura.